What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be doing yet another class guide, this one being the last of all the regular classes, which is the Specialist class. Almost a year ago now I made some class guides for the regular classes in Battlefront 2, and obviously in the last year there have been some drastic changes to not only the regular classes but also just the game in general. And so with so many new or returning players coming to play Battlefront 2, I thought it was about time we went through all the classes again. Now, before we get started, you can see on screen what we're going to be going through in this video. So first off, I'll touch on their base abilities before moving on to the weapons and the stats for each blaster, as well as quickly touch on the mods for each weapon. Then we'll move on to 4 different star card combinations, or builds as most people call it, including a marksman build, an objective build, a battle point build, and my own personal cards as well. And then lastly, we will just go through some general tips for the Specialist class as well. So hopefully all the stuff you saw on screen is what you guys are looking for in a class guide, and if it is, then make sure to smash that like button if you do end up enjoying the video, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you are new to the channel. So with all of that out of the way, we are going to go ahead and get stuck right into it. And first off, I do just have to mention their regular health pool. So they have a base HP of 150, which is obviously just the average for the regular classes. And for those who are a little bit newer to the game, you may not know that this did actually used to be only 100 HP up until maybe about a year ago now, so these guys did used to be a lot harder to play with. Now, as for their base abilities, their L1 ability is the Shock Grenade, which, exactly as the name suggests, will just temporarily shock and slow enemies who are within its area of effect, as well as deal a small amount of damage. Everyone knows how to use a grenade, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this thing can be very handy at cutting off choke points and slowing down enemy heroes, so definitely make the most of it whenever you can. The star cards that are available for the L1 ability are an improved version of the Shock Grenade, the Repulsor Cannon, which is essentially just an air cannon that knocks down enemies, and the Stinger Pistol ability as well. Moving on to their L1R1 ability, and this one is the Infiltration ability that allows you to go undetected on enemy radars, as well as pulling out a trusty EE4 rifle with a crazy high rate of fire that can usually take out enemies in probably 1 to 2 close range bursts. The star cards that are available for the L1R1 ability are all variants of this Infiltration ability, and these are the Killstreak Infiltration, the Hardened Infiltration, and the Scramble Infiltration. The Killstreak Infiltration is essentially the same thing, however it just has a much shorter base active time, yet also slightly recharges on each kill, so if you can get a quick streak with it, it will actually last longer than normal. The Hardened Infiltration card is also very similar to the base one, however this one just gives you a slight damage reduction while the ability is active. As for the Scramble Infiltration, this one is easily the best in my opinion, as it reveals enemies on your minimap to your teammates as well, plus it actually scrambles the enemy radars as well, meaning that their radars are essentially useless. Now, as for the R1 ability, this one is the Thermal Binoculars, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. So when you pull these out, you will be able to scope in using the ADS button, the same as your regular blasters, and pretty much every enemy on the entire map will be shown through walls via their heat signatures, so this one is kind of a little bit like a wall hack. Any enemies that are in your direct line of sight can also be marked by using the fire button, which outlines them in red for a few seconds and allows your teammates to easily see them when it's active. The star cards that are available for the R1 ability are the Improved Binoculars, the Bubble Shield, which I'm sure everyone already knows, and the Trip Mine, which is pretty much just an explosive that will detonate as soon as anyone steps over the tripwire. So that's actually it for all of the abilities and the cards that go hand in hand with those abilities. Now we're going to move on to the Specialist class's weapons and break down some of their stats. So first up we have their base blaster, which actually changes depending on which faction you're playing, and this is your stock standard blaster, so it has pretty even stats compared to most of the other weapons. At close range it will deal 45 damage to the body and 85 damage to the head, and at long range it will actually deal the exact same stats, as being a sniper it doesn't actually have any drop off at all, so definitely make the most of that range. Honestly, I pretty much never use this blaster at all. Like I said, it's far from a bad weapon, but there are just a few other options that pretty much just beat it in most situations. So it's definitely a decent blaster for any of you who are new to the game and maybe haven't unlocked some of the other weapons yet. But once you do unlock those other weapons, this one can easily be forgotten with good reason. Moving on to the second weapon, which is the IQA-11, and this one is a little bit more like a regular sniper rifle with a bit of a slower rate of fire but also a very hefty damage buff. At close range, the IQA will deal 67 damage to the body and a massive 127 damage to the head, which is enough to actually 2-hit kill every regular class and the aerial class as well. And then at long range, again, it does actually have the same stats, so this one is a really good option for those long range snipers. Now, as for the attachments, or mods as they're called, I would probably recommend going with the improved bolt speed, which allows it to just be fired a little bit faster, and the improved cooling, which means it won't overheat nearly as fast. This weapon is actually really well suited for long range, and since it's the second weapon you unlock for this class, it will definitely last you quite a while, and honestly I know a lot of people that actually prefer this over all the other weapons, so it clearly does its job fairly well. Moving on to the third weapon, which is the A280 CFE, and this one is actually more of an assault rifle than a sniper rifle, so if you are more inclined to play a little bit more aggressively, then this blaster may be the one for you. At close range, this will deal 33 damage to the body and 62 damage to the head, and then at long range it deals 25 damage to the body and 47 damage to the head, but keep in mind that that's actually per shot, and so when you equip the 3-round burst mod, these stats are essentially tripled at the cost of just a little bit more recoil. Now as for the mods, like I mentioned, I'd recommend using the burst attachment, as this honestly becomes one of the better blasters in the game with that mod equipped, and then I'd also recommend using the ion shot for getting rid of any shields or turrets. You may not personally like the ion shot, but I'll leave a card up in the top right to my Mythbusters episode on the ion shot, and you'll see exactly why I personally recommend using it. This blaster is very unique from the others in the class, and it allows you to play a lot more aggressively, so if you do use it, then make sure to get up on those front lines and try and lead your team into battle. Moving on now to the fourth and final weapon, which is probably most people's favourite for this class, and this is the notorious NT242. This thing is an absolute beast. It has a much slower rate of fire than the IQA, but it definitely makes up for that in the damage department. At close range, it will deal 106 damage to the body and a whopping 201 damage to the head, meaning you can one-shot any class in the game, and then of course at long range there is no damage drop-off whatsoever. The mods I'd recommend using are the dual zoom and improved cooling, or if you're trying to take out vehicles, then the disruptor shot is also a very good choice. Like I said, this blaster is capable of one-hit kills across the map, and while I don't really want to condone sitting all the way at the back sniping, if you can get yourself into an aggressive yet somewhat safe position, you can really cause a lot of damage to the enemy team. So that is it for all of the blasters and the mods for the specialist class. Again, they are all somewhat similar yet also pretty unique in their own right, and so I can't recommend it enough to give them all a go and try and figure out which one suits you the best. So now we're going to move on to the star cards, and like I said, rather than wasting time going through all the cards, I'm going to give you guys 4 different combinations or builds which are all suited to some very different types of playstyles. So starting off with the marksman build, and as the name suggests, this card combination is going to be suited to a more typical sniper type of role, so this is a good combination to pair with the NT or the IQA. The first card for this one, with a pretty fitting name, is the marksman star card, and this makes it so that each time you get a headshot, your blaster will actually cool down by up to 40%, so pretty much if you can land say 10 headshots in a row, your blaster just won't overheat, when it would usually overheat in 4 to 5 shots, causing you to have to reload. This really helps if you're in a situation where there's just heaps of enemies in your line of sights. Usually with the NT242 for example, you'd have to shoot 3 or 4 times and then reload, but if you can aim well enough, this can pretty much just bypass the need to reload, saving you a lot of the risk of sniping. The second card for this build is the stealth star card, and this one makes it so that you don't actually show up on the minimap when you fire your blaster, meaning you can get into some really aggressive spots without your enemies even knowing you're there. It also causes your melee to deal up to 125 damage per hit, so it does also help you out in those close quarter situations, as that's obviously a bit of a downfall of sniping, in that you'll generally be at a disadvantage up close, so that melee really can help out as well. As for the last card, this one is the survivalist card, which just reduces the time it takes for your health to start regenerating. If you're sniping and you get hit, you generally have to kind of hide until your health is full, because only one more shot will take you out. With this card equipped though, you're going to be able to get back up and counter snipe much faster, which most enemies won't be expecting, meaning you can pick off your enemies a whole lot faster. With these 3 cards equipped, you're going to be really well suited to those long range maps like Hoth and Crate, and so if you do enjoy sniping at long range, then these are definitely some very good cards for you to try out. Moving on to the second card build, which is the objective build, and this is for those of you who enjoy helping your teammates as well as playing your own part in getting those objectives. The first card for this one is the Scramble Infiltration card, which, like I mentioned earlier, allows your teammates to see the enemies on the minimap, which is an absolute game changer, and it also scrambles the enemy team's radar. So honestly, I think this is probably the best objective related ability in the game, other than maybe the Squad Shield for the officer class. Now the next card is actually going to be a choice between 3 different cards, which are the Personal Shield, the Trip Mine and the Survivalist cards. This essentially comes down to both the situation and just your own personal preference. If you're defending an objective, then the Trip Mine might be the better choice so that you can kind of lock down a doorway to help defend. Or if you're attacking an objective, then the shield might help you plant an objective, or for both of those cases the Survivalist card is a good choice as well. So just have a play around between these 3 cards. As for the third card, this is going to be the Bodyguard star card that pretty much just reduces the damage you'll take from explosives or toxins, so this one really does just speak for itself. Now, like I said, this build is perfect for those who enjoy playing the objective and helping their teammates out, so if you are a team-oriented player, then I'd definitely recommend giving these cards a try and even mixing and matching some other cards in there as well. Moving on to the third build, which is the Battle Point build, and just as it sounds, this is for those of you who want to try and race for those heroes or vehicles, or for those who want to try and save up thousands of battle points to use towards the end of the game when the match is on the line. The first card is going to be the Bounty Hunter card for obvious reasons. This one is literally just designed to earn you more battle points, so this is definitely a no-brainer. The second card to use is the Improved Shock Grenade star card, as this thing will actually earn heaps of battle points if you throw it in a choke point or on an objective, dealing damage to the enemies, and then because it slows them down it can be hard to get away from it, resulting in even more battle points. As for the last card, this is the Improved Binoculars card, as again this thing will just rack up battle points via the kill assist, as well as just allowing you to be more wary of your surroundings, resulting in more kills, which also results in more battle points. This is probably one of the better star card setups for the specialist. If you do want to try and get the first hero, you can still get heroes fast no matter what cards or class you use if you just play well, but this is still no doubt one of the easiest ways to earn battle points. Now moving on to the last build, and this is just more my own personal build that I tend to run most of the time. So the first card is going to be the Stealth card that I mentioned earlier. This card is awesome, and for me it's probably a must-have card at all times. The second card is the Marksman card again, as this one really does just make chain sniping so much funner when you can consecutively kill a bunch of enemies in a row. Trust me, it doesn't happen too much to me, but when it does happen it is definitely a very nice feeling. As for the third card, I usually run either the Improved Shock that I just mentioned or the Shield depending on the map, as that can be a real lifesaver more often than not. So that's pretty much it for all of these star cards, guys. Like I said, there is still plenty of cards that I haven't even touched on, as I just don't want the video to drag on for too long. But I do recommend testing out a bunch of the other cards as well if you do get a chance, as there are some very useful cards to use in there as well. The other thing is that you can very easily mix and match the combinations that I mentioned, which as you can see, I kind of do that with my own personal build by running almost the same as the Marksman build, but with just a few little changes. So definitely have a go at mixing and matching some different card combinations, as at the end of the day the ones I mentioned are just the starting place for those who aren't too sure. Now, before we finish up, the last thing I want to touch on is your playstyle. The Specialist class is obviously meant to play that sniper role more often than not, but you can mix it up from time to time and still do very well. Depending on the map, you can switch up between some weapons like the IQA or the NT if it's a little bit more open, so maps like Hoth, Crate and Geonosis for example, and then on other maps like the Death Star or Tatooine, you can switch it up to the A280 CFE with that burst fire and play a very similar way to the Assault class, so the playstyle can be varied a lot depending on the weapons and the cards that you do choose. One thing that isn't worth doing though is sitting back and trying to pick off enemies across the map. Now sure, on Hoth or Crate that's a solid strategy, so that's a little bit different, but on less open maps you're much better off trying to flank, get beside or behind your enemies and then pick them off from an aggressive area, as that's going to help your team a whole lot more and generally it will result in a better game for you anyway. Regardless of how you played though, you should be trying to help lead your team to the win, making the most of those longer range weapons to keep some distance between you and your enemies, as well as providing some cover for your teammates. So that is going to do it for this one, guys. Hopefully these tips can help you guys out, and if they did then make sure to leave a like down below to help support the channel. That does actually conclude these regular class guides for now. I will most likely do a couple of reinforcement guides from time to time, but as of right now this will be the end of the series. If you are new to the channel then feel free to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 videos or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day and I will catch you all in the next one.
Roger, roger.